Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he guided his drunk Zephyrian boss, Keth Al, through the winding corridors of the orbital station. The alien's four legs wobbled dangerously with each step, his crystalline body segments clicking together in an off-rhythm pattern that made Marcus wince. 3 bottles of fermented algae extract had reduced the normally dignified department head to a stumbling mess. "Marcus, my friend," Keth Al slurred, his translator struggling with the alcohol-induced speech patterns. "You humans, you are strange creatures. So small, so fragile, yet you work harder than any Zephyrian I know." Marcus chuckled despite his exhaustion. It had been another 18-hour shift in the waste processing division, the least glamorous job on Nexus Station. While other species handled the prestigious work of diplomacy, trade, and scientific research, humans were relegated to the dirty jobs: cleaning, maintenance, food service, and waste management. The galactic community saw them as useful laborers, nothing more. "Just doing my job, sir," Marcus replied, adjusting his grip on Keth Al's arm as they navigated around a group of tall, elegant Altarians who barely acknowledged their presence. The Nexus Station buzzed with activity even at this late hour. Representatives from dozens of species moved through the main corridors, their various forms of locomotion creating a symphony of clicks, slithers, and padding sounds. Holographic displays advertised luxury goods, high-end entertainment, and exclusive residential areas. None of it was meant for humans. Marcus had been on the station for 3 years, ever since Earth had been granted provisional membership in the Galactic Confederation. The terms were harsh but fair, according to the alien diplomats. Humanity could join, but they would start at the bottom, prove their worth through service, show they could integrate peacefully into galactic society. What the aliens didn't mention was how long that proving period might last, or if it would ever end. Keth Al's quarters were in the mid-level residential sector, a decent area but nothing fancy. As they approached the door, the Zephyrian fumbled for his access card, his coordination completely shot. Marcus gently took the card and helped his boss inside. The apartment was Spartanly furnished by galactic standards, but luxurious compared to the cramped human dormitories in the lower levels. Keth Al collapsed onto his resting platform, a heated stone slab that maintained the temperature his species required for sleep. "Marcus," Keth Al said, his voice becoming more serious despite his intoxication. "There are things happening, political things, changes coming to the Confederation." Marcus helped remove his boss's work harness, the complex strapping system that held various tools and status indicators. "What kind of changes?" "The Emperor. He's been asking questions about humans, about your capabilities." Keth Al's large, compound eyes focused on Marcus with unusual intensity. "Some of the department heads think you're being underutilized, that perhaps the current arrangement isn't optimal." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Changes in galactic politics usually meant bad news for humans. Their position was precarious enough as it was. "Sir, you should rest. We can talk about this tomorrow when you're feeling better." Keth Al waved a dismissive appendage. Yes, tomorrow. But Marcus, be careful. There are those who would see humanity's status changed, but not necessarily improved. The hegemony faction grows stronger each cycle. Marcus knew about the hegemony, a political movement that believed in strict species hierarchy, with the primitive races like humanity serving the advanced civilizations permanently. They viewed the current arrangement as too generous. After ensuring Keth Al was settled and the apartment was secure, Marcus made his way back through the station's corridors. The late hour meant fewer crowds, but the automated systems hummed constantly around him. Environmental controls, waste processors, power distribution networks. Systems that largely ran themselves now, but still required human oversight because their labor was cheaper than full automation. The human quarters were located in Section C7, deep in the station's lower levels. The corridors here were narrower, the lighting dimmer to save power. Marcus passed other humans heading to or from their shifts. Night janitors cleaning the upper levels. Kitchen staff preparing for the morning meal service. Security guards monitoring the less important areas. They nodded to each other in passing, a quiet solidarity born from shared circumstances. Most were from Earth's various nations, brought up to the station as part of the integration program. A few were born on Luna or Mars colonies. All were making the best of their situation, hoping their service would eventually earn humanity a better place in the galactic community. Marcus's quarters were typical for human staff. A small rectangular room with a narrow bed, a desk, storage compartments, and a tiny refresher unit. The walls displayed rotating images of Earth landscapes, a psychological necessity according to the human welfare officers. Views of forests, oceans, and mountains to remind them of home. He was about to activate his door lock when he noticed something unusual. A faint energy signature coming from inside his room. Marcus had learned to recognize the various electromagnetic fields that different technologies produced. It was a survival skill when working around alien equipment that could be dangerous to humans. This signature was unlike anything he'd encountered before. Powerful, but controlled. Advanced beyond anything on the station. Marcus hesitated. Protocol demanded he report unusual energy readings to security, but if someone was in his room, they had bypassed multiple security systems to get there. That kind of capability suggested either very advanced technology or very high authority. He pressed his palm to the access panel. The door slid open with its usual soft hiss. The figure sitting calmly in Marcus's desk chair was immediately recognizable, despite the impossibility of his presence. Every being in the Confederation knew that face from official broadcasts and governmental displays. The Emperor Valdris Ashkente, supreme ruler of the Galactic Confederation, sat in the cramped quarters of a human waste technician as casually as if he were in his own throne room. The Emperor was of the ethereal race, beings of such advanced evolution that they barely required physical form. His body appeared as a shimmering outline of energy contained within a vaguely humanoid shape, occasionally flickering between translucency and solidity. When he spoke, his voice resonated directly in Marcus's mind, rather than through the air. "Please sit down, Marcus Chen," the Emperor said, gesturing to the narrow bed. "We have much to discuss." Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, his mind struggling to process the situation. The Emperor of the Galactic Confederation was in his room. The being who ruled over trillions of sentience across thousands of worlds had somehow transported himself to the most insignificant corner of a mid-level orbital station. "Your Majesty," Marcus managed, dropping to one knee in what he hoped was the proper protocol. How can I serve?" "By sitting down and speaking with me as one rational being to another," the Emperor replied with what might have been amusement. "I am not here in my official capacity, Marcus Chen. I am here because I have questions that require honest answers, and I have learned that honest answers are rarely given to emperors in throne rooms." Marcus slowly moved to his bed and sat down, acutely aware of how surreal the situation was. The most powerful being in known space was having a private conversation with a human janitor in quarters barely larger than a storage closet. "You want to know about humans?" Marcus said, surprising himself with his directness. "I want to know about you specifically," the Emperor corrected. "Your file makes interesting reading. Master's degree in xenobiology from the University of New Geneva. Specialized training in alien technology interfaces. Advanced certifications in multiple engineering disciplines. Yet you process waste and escort drunk Zephyrians to their quarters." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. The integration program assigns positions based on available openings, Your Majesty. Humans take what work is offered. Indeed. And what do you think of this arrangement? The question hung in the air between them. Marcus knew this was dangerous territory. Criticizing the Confederation's policies to its ruler could result in humanity's expulsion from galactic society. But something in the Emperor's manner suggested he wanted truth, not diplomacy. I think it's wasteful, Marcus said carefully. Not just for humans, but for the Confederation. There are thousands of trained professionals working as cleaning staff and food service workers, scientists washing dishes, engineers fixing toilets. We could contribute more. And why do you believe your species has been assigned these roles? Marcus considered his words. Because we're new, because we're unknown, because it's safer to put us in positions where we can't cause damage while you figure out what we're really capable of. The Emperor's form flickered with what Marcus interpreted as approval. A diplomatic answer that contains truth. But I sense you have less diplomatic thoughts on the matter. Marcus looked directly at the shimmering figure. You want my honest opinion? I think some species in the Confederation are afraid of what humans might accomplish if given the chance. So they keep us busy with busy work and call it integration. Name these species: the Hegemony faction, the Altarians who think they're naturally superior, the Crystalline Collective that believes in earned hierarchy. Marcus felt reckless now, driven by years of frustration. They look at humans and see barbarians who barely invented faster-than-light travel. They can't imagine that we might have other qualities worth contributing. Such as adaptability, creativity, the ability to find solutions that don't follow conventional thinking. Marcus stood up, pacing in the tiny space. Do you know how many impossible repairs I've made on this station? How many times I've fixed alien technology by approaching it from an angle its designers never considered? But that gets filed under maintenance work and forgotten. The Emperor watched him silently for a long moment. When he spoke again, his mental voice carried a weight that made Marcus sink back onto his bed. Marcus Chen, I am going to share something with you that is known to fewer than a dozen beings in the Confederation. In 6 cycles, we will face a crisis that threatens the survival of our civilization. Our military analysts, our greatest scientific minds, our most advanced artificial intelligences have all reached the same conclusion. With our current capabilities and conventional approaches, we will fail. Marcus felt the room grow cold. What kind of crisis? The Devourers have returned. The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Every species in the galaxy knew the stories, though most thought them mythology. The Devourers were supposedly an ancient enemy that had nearly destroyed galactic civilization eons ago before mysteriously disappearing. Beings of pure hunger that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but empty space in their wake. They're real? They are real, and they are coming. Our deep space monitoring stations detected their approach 6 cycles ago. They have consumed everything in their path across 3 neighboring galaxies. We estimate they will reach the outer rim of our territory within 6 cycles. Marcus's mind raced. What do your military experts recommend? Evacuation, abandonment of the outer colonies, consolidation of our forces around the core worlds, fighting a defensive war while gradually retreating toward the galactic center. The Emperor's form seemed to dim slightly. In essence, they recommend accepting defeat slowly rather than quickly. But you don't agree. I refuse to accept that a civilization that has survived for millions of years should simply resign itself to extinction. But I also recognize that our conventional approaches have proved inadequate. The Emperor leaned forward. This is why I am here, Marcus Chen, because unconventional problems require unconventional solutions. Marcus felt the weight of implication settling on his shoulders. You think humans might have something to offer. I think humans are the most unconventional species to join the Confederation in my lifetime. Your people have survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and environmental disasters through adaptation and innovation. You have reached technological advancement through paths completely different from any other known species. And you want us to help fight the Devourers. I want to give humanity the opportunity to prove their worth in a way that matters. If you succeed, it will earn your species a permanent place of honor in the Confederation. If you fail, the Emperor paused. If you fail, the failure will not be yours alone. Marcus stood up again, his mind working through the implications. What exactly are you proposing? I am creating a special task force. Small, mobile, authorized to operate outside normal Confederation protocols. Its mission will be to find new approaches to the Devourer threat. New strategies, new technologies, new tactics. The Emperor's form solidified slightly. I want you to lead the human component of this force. Me? Your Majesty? I'm just a waste technician. There are human military officers, scientists, diplomats who are far more qualified. Human military officers who have been trained in conventional galactic warfare. Scientists who have been studying conventional galactic technology. Diplomats who have been learning conventional galactic politics. The Emperor stood, his energy form towering in the small room. I need unconventional thinking, Marcus Chen. I need someone who sees the problems the rest of us cannot see. Marcus felt his heart pounding. This was beyond anything he had ever imagined. What would this involve? Complete access to Confederation military and scientific resources, authority to recruit personnel from any member species, the right to pursue any avenue of research or strategy you deem promising. The Emperor moved toward the door. In exchange, you would be responsible for developing new methods to combat an enemy that has proven invulnerable to our best efforts. How many humans would I be able to recruit? As many as you believe necessary. The task force will have unlimited funding and highest priority status. But Marcus Chen... The Emperor paused at the door. You must understand that this opportunity comes with significant risks. There are factions within the Confederation that will view humanity's elevation as a threat to their own status. They will work to undermine your efforts. Marcus nodded slowly. The hegemony faction, among others. Some will attempt to sabotage your work directly. Others will seek to have the program terminated through political pressure. A few may resort to more extreme measures. Why are you risking this? Why put so much faith in a species most of your government considers primitive? The Emperor's form flickered one final time before fully materializing into a solid, almost human-like appearance. For a moment, Marcus could see the individual who existed beneath the imperial authority. Someone ancient and tired, carrying the weight of billions of lives. Because, Marcus Chen, I have spent centuries watching our civilization become complacent. We have grown comfortable with our superiority, convinced that our advanced technology and established methods can solve any problem. The Devourers have proven us wrong. He placed a hand that felt surprisingly warm on Marcus's shoulder. Sometimes it takes fresh eyes to see what experience has made blind. The Emperor moved toward the door, which opened silently at his approach. You have 48 hours to consider my offer. If you accept, report to Docking Bay 7. A ship will be waiting to transport you to your new facilities. And if I decline, then you will return to your duties in waste processing, and we will find another way to face the coming storm. The Emperor stepped into the corridor. But Marcus Chen, I hope you will not decline. I believe your species has been waiting for this opportunity without even knowing it. The door closed behind the Emperor, leaving Marcus alone in his quarters. He sat on his bed, staring at the spot where the ruler of the galaxy had just stood, trying to convince himself that the conversation had actually happened. On his desk, where no object had been before, lay a small crystal data storage device. Apparently, the Emperor had left him something to consider along with his decision. Marcus picked up the crystal, feeling its weight in his palm. Such a small object, but he somehow knew it contained information that would change everything he understood about the galaxy and humanity's place in it. Outside his window, the stars continued their eternal dance, unaware that somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, an ancient enemy was moving closer to everything they held dear. And somewhere on a small orbital station, a human waste technician held the key to either salvation or extinction. Marcus spent the next 36 hours studying the contents of the crystal the Emperor had left behind. What he found inside challenged everything. He thought he knew about the galaxy and humanity's history within it. The data contained detailed records of the Devourer's previous invasion, complete with tactical analyses, technological assessments, and historical accounts from surviving civilizations. The scale of destruction was beyond comprehension. Entire star systems consumed, their matter converted into pure energy to fuel the Devourer's advance. Civilizations that had existed for millions of years reduced to scattered refugees in a matter of decades. But what disturbed Marcus most were the tactical reports from the ancient war. The Confederation's predecessors had possessed technology far more advanced than anything currently available. Weapons that could shatter moons, shields that could protect entire planets, faster-than-light communication networks that spanned the galaxy instantly. None of it had been enough. The Devourers adapted. Every weapon used against them was eventually turned to their advantage. Every defensive strategy was overcome. Every technological advantage was neutralized and absorbed into their collective intelligence. They were not just destroyers, but perfect learners, becoming stronger with each victory. The final section of the data contained psychological profiles of the current Confederation leadership, along with the Emperor's private assessments of their responses to the Devourer threat. Marcus read through reports of closed-door meetings where military leaders argued for traditional tactics that had already failed once before. Scientific councils that insisted the same technologies that proved inadequate eons ago would somehow work better now. Political factions more concerned with maintaining their power than addressing the existential threat. It was a civilization preparing to fight the last war instead of the next one. Marcus made his decision. Docking Bay 7 was located in the station's commercial sector, normally reserved for diplomatic vessels and high-end transport ships. When Marcus arrived carrying his few possessions in a standard-issue duffel bag, he expected to find a small courier ship, or perhaps a military transport. Instead, he found the Synthesis, a vessel unlike anything he had ever seen. The ship was clearly of hybrid construction, incorporating design elements from dozens of different species. Sleek Altarian curves blended with angular crystalline geometry. Zephyrian biological components merged seamlessly with mechanical systems from races he couldn't identify. It was as if someone had taken the best aspects of galactic engineering and woven them into a single, unified design. A figure approached him across the docking bay deck. She was human, but Marcus could tell immediately that she was military. Her bearing, her purposeful stride, the way her eyes automatically scanned for potential threats. She wore a uniform he didn't recognize, dark blue with silver accents and insignia that meant nothing to him. "Marcus Chen?" she asked, extending a hand. "Captain Sarah Rodriguez, formerly of Earth Defense Command. I'm your new military liaison." Marcus shook her hand, noting the strength in her grip. "I didn't realize there were other humans involved in this project." "There aren't. Yet." Rodriguez gestured toward the ship. "I was recruited yesterday, About 6 hours after my commanding officer received a message from someone claiming to speak for the Emperor. Apparently, they decided you might need someone with tactical experience. They walked together toward the synthesis's boarding ramp. Up close, Marcus could see the incredible complexity of the ship's construction. Systems from different species that should have been incompatible were somehow working in perfect harmony. "Any idea who built this thing?" Marcus asked. "According to the documentation I received, it was constructed by a joint team representing every major species in the Confederation. Apparently, they've been working on it for the past 3 years. Rodriguez paused at the bottom of the ramp. The interesting thing is that most of the team members didn't know what they were building. Each group worked on specific components, but only the project coordinators understood the overall design. Inside the ship, Marcus was even more impressed. The corridors were spacious enough to accommodate the largest known species, but somehow didn't feel oversized for humans. Environmental controls adjusted automatically as they moved through different sections, maintaining optimal conditions for whatever species might be using each area. Rodriguez led him to what she called the mission briefing room, a circular chamber with a holographic display system at its center. As they entered, the lights brightened automatically and the display activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. "Your first surprise," Rodriguez said with a slight smile. "We're not alone." 3 other figures were seated around the holographic display. Marcus recognized their species, though he had never met any of them personally. A tall insectoid Vrix with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the holographic light. A small, furry Peeboan whose species was known for their incredible mathematical abilities. And most surprising of all, a crystalline collective member whose translucent body contained swirling patterns of light that indicated deep thought. "Introductions," Rodriguez announced. "Dr. Zek of the Vrix Consortium, our xenobiology specialist, Professor Nim of the Peeboan Mathematical Institute, our strategic analyst, and Resonance of Ancient Wisdom of the Crystalline Collective, our technology integration expert." Marcus looked around the group, feeling suddenly out of place. "These are some of the most brilliant minds in the galaxy. What am I doing here?" "Leading them," said a new voice from the chamber's entrance. Marcus turned to see another human entering the room, but this one was different. Older, with silver hair and scars across his face that spoke of combat experience. He wore the same unfamiliar uniform as Rodriguez, but with additional insignia that suggested higher rank. "Admiral James Harrison," the man introduced himself, "retired from active duty as of yesterday when I received a very interesting job offer." He moved to the display and manipulated the controls with practiced ease. "Gentlemen, ladies, beings of various classifications, we have exactly 72 hours to become the most effective anti-devourer task force in galactic history." The holographic display shifted, showing detailed images of the approaching enemy. Marcus had seen pictures before, but these were different. Real-time reconnaissance data showing massive, irregularly shaped vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved in coordinated patterns that suggested incredible intelligence, but their behavior was unlike anything in the known tactical databases. "Current projections show first contact in 6 cycles," Harrison continued. "The Outer Rim colonies have been evacuated, but refugee fleet management is becoming a logistical nightmare. The Confederation military is establishing defensive positions around key systems, but their strategy is essentially to make the enemy work for each victory." Dr. Zek's mandibles clicked in what Marcus recognized as skepticism. "Forgive the observation, but conventional defensive strategies proved inadequate during the previous invasion. Why does the Confederation leadership believe they will succeed now?" "Because they don't want to admit that conventional strategies might not be enough," Professor Nim replied, his small voice carrying surprising authority. Mathematical analysis of the historical data suggests that the Devourer's learning capacity is exponential. Each engagement makes them significantly more dangerous than the previous one. Resonance of ancient wisdom's crystalline form pulsed with shifting colors. When the being spoke, its voice resonated like music. The collective has preserved memories from the ancient war. Our predecessors attempted to match the Devourer's technological advancement through rapid innovation. The effort nearly destroyed our civilization even before the enemy arrived. Marcus studied the tactical displays, his mind working through the implications. So we can't outfight them using conventional methods. We can't out-tech them using conventional research, and we can't outthink them using conventional strategy. That's a remarkably accurate summary, Admiral Harrison said with grim approval. Which brings us to why this little group exists. We are officially designated as Special Research Task Force 7. Unofficially, we're the last desperate hope before total evacuation team. Rodriguez activated another section of the display, showing their ship's specifications. The synthesis is equipped with the most advanced research facilities available, along with manufacturing capabilities that can produce small-scale prototypes of almost any conceivable technology. We also have unrestricted access to Confederation databases and the authority to requisition any resources we might need. What's our mandate? Marcus asked. Find something that works, Harrison replied bluntly. The Emperor's exact words were, explore every possibility that conventional wisdom has dismissed as impractical, impossible, or insane. We have complete operational freedom, with one restriction, which is, everything we develop must be capable of implementation within 6 cycles. No theoretical solutions, no long-term research projects. If we can't build it, test it, and deploy it before the Devourers arrive, it's useless. Marcus looked around the group again, seeing the weight of responsibility in every face. Where do we start? Dr. Zek leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting the holographic light. With the fundamental question that has puzzled xenobiologists for centuries. What are the Devourers, really? The historical records describe them as technological entities, but their behavior patterns suggest something more complex. Professor Nim activated his own section of the display, showing mathematical models that hurt Marcus's eyes to look at directly. Strategic analysis indicates that treating them as conventional enemy forces may be the wrong approach entirely. Their response patterns suggest a form of distributed intelligence that operates on principles we don't understand. The collective's ancient memories speak of something even more disturbing, Resonance of Ancient Wisdom added, the impression of consciousness without individual identity, purpose without emotion, intelligence without wisdom. Marcus felt pieces of a puzzle beginning to form in his mind, though he couldn't yet see the complete picture. What if we're looking at this wrong? What if the problem isn't that our weapons aren't powerful enough, but that we're using the wrong kind of weapons entirely? Explain, Harrison said. Every report describes the Devourers as perfect learning machines. They adapt to whatever we throw at them, incorporate our technologies, turn our strengths against us. Marcus stood up, beginning to pace as his thoughts crystallized. But what if we could create something they couldn't learn from? Something so fundamentally different from conventional technology that their adaptation mechanisms couldn't process it? Rodriguez looked skeptical. What could be so different that an intelligence capable of consuming galaxies couldn't understand it? Something chaotic, something unpredictable, something that doesn't follow the logical patterns that machine intelligence relies on. Marcus turned to face the group. Something human. Dr. Zek's mandibles clicked rapidly. You're suggesting that human technological approaches might be fundamentally incompatible with Devourer learning systems? I'm suggesting that human technological approaches are fundamentally incompatible with everyone's systems, Marcus replied. That's why we're considered primitive. We don't follow standard engineering principles. We jury-rig solutions that shouldn't work but do. We combine technologies in ways that violate best practices but somehow achieve better results. Professor Nim's small form was practically vibrating with excitement. The mathematical implications are fascinating. If devourer adaptation relies on recognizing patterns in technological development, then technologies that deliberately violate those patterns might prove invisible to their learning mechanisms. The collective has observed human engineering practices, Resonance of Ancient Wisdom said, its crystalline form pulsing with rapid color changes. Your species consistently produces solutions that our analytical frameworks classify as impossible. Yet they function. Admiral Harrison was studying Marcus with new interest. You're talking about weaponizing human unpredictability. I'm talking about building systems the devourers can't understand because they're too chaotic to analyze, Marcus corrected. Not random chaos, but controlled chaos. Human chaos. How do we implement that? Rodriguez asked. Marcus looked around the room, seeing the beginning of something unprecedented. A team that combined the galaxy's best analytical minds with human creativity. Traditional knowledge with unconventional approaches. We start by breaking every rule of conventional engineering, he said. We take the most advanced technologies available and combine them in ways that make no sense. We build systems that work despite violating basic principles. We create weapons that are too human for alien intelligence to comprehend. Dr. Zek stood up, his forearms gesturing excitedly. The implications for xenotechnology integration alone would revolutionize our understanding of engineering principles. The strategic applications could reshape how we approach interstellar warfare, Professor Nim added. The collective would be honored to participate in such research, Resonance of Ancient Wisdom concluded. Admiral Harrison was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical displays. Finally, he spoke. You realize what you're proposing? You want to bet the survival of galactic civilization on the possibility that human engineering is too weird for cosmic destroyers to figure out? Marcus nodded. That's exactly what I'm proposing. It's completely insane, which might be exactly what makes it work. Harrison smiled for the first time since entering the room. In that case, let's get started. Rodriguez set course for the research facility Omega. We have 6 cycles to prove that human insanity can save the galaxy. As the synthesis departed Nexus Station, Marcus stood in the observation deck watching the stars wheel slowly past. Somewhere out there, an ancient enemy was approaching with the power to consume worlds. But for the first time since learning about the threat, he felt something other than despair. He felt the peculiar human combination of terror and excitement that came from facing an impossible challenge. The same feeling that had driven his species to explore dangerous continents, sail across unknown oceans, and reach for distant stars. The Devourers were about to learn something that the rest of the galaxy was just beginning to understand. Humans didn't just survive impossible odds, they thrived on them. Research Facility Omega existed in the deep space between star systems, a massive structure that dwarfed most orbital stations. As the synthesis approached, Marcus could see sections representing every major galactic civilization. Each area maintained its own environmental conditions, its own technological standards, its own research methodologies. It was meant to be the pinnacle of cooperative scientific achievement. What Marcus found instead was a monument to bureaucratic paralysis. Welcome to the most advanced research facility in the galaxy, Admiral Harrison said dryly as they reviewed the facility's organizational charts. Home to 14,000 of the brightest minds from 200 species, all working in perfect isolation from each other. Dr. Zeka's mandibles clicked in disapproval as he studied the personnel assignments. The current research structure segregates teams by species classification. Vrix researchers work exclusively with Vrix methodologies. Altarian teams follow only Altarian protocols. There is minimal cross-species collaboration. which explains why they haven't made any significant breakthroughs in 3 years of anti-devourer research, Professor Nim observed, his small form hunched over complex statistical analyses. Mathematical modeling suggests that isolated research efforts have a near-zero probability of producing novel solutions to unprecedented problems. Resonance of ancient wisdom's crystalline body pulsed with frustrated colors. The collective attempted to share preserved memories from the ancient war, but the facility's research protocols require all historical data to be verified through conventional archaeological methods. The process has been ongoing for 37 months with no conclusions reached. Marcus looked around the team meeting room aboard their ship, feeling the weight of wasted time and squandered opportunities. How long before we can get clearance to begin our own research? That's the beautiful thing about our mandate, Captain Rodriguez said with a predatory smile. We don't need clearance. The Emperor's authorization supersedes all facility protocols. We can requisition whatever resources we need and conduct research using whatever methods we choose. Admiral Harrison activated the communications system. Attention Research Facility Omega Control. This is Special Research Task Force 7, requesting immediate docking clearance and full resource allocation priority. The response came back within minutes, but the tone was distinctly cold. Task Force 7, you are cleared for docking at Bay 94. Please note that all research activities must comply with established safety protocols and interspecies cooperation guidelines. Facility Director Kesha Tar will meet with your team to discuss integration procedures. Translation, Harrison said after closing the channel. They're going to try to bury us in paperwork and committee meetings until the Devourers arrive. Dr. Zek stood up abruptly, his 4 arms moving in agitated patterns. Perhaps it is time to demonstrate why the Emperor chose to work outside normal channels. 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself in the most awkward diplomatic situation of his life. Director Kesha Tar was an imposing crystalline being whose body contained swirling patterns that indicated deep annoyance. Around the conference table sat department heads from every major research division, all of whom looked like they had better things to do than deal with a small team of misfits. I must express serious concerns about your proposed research methodology, Director Kesha Tar was saying, his crystalline voice resonating with authority. The facility's safety protocols exist for good reasons. Uncontrolled experimentation with untested technologies poses risks not only to your team, but to the 14,000 researchers currently working here. Marcus looked around the table, seeing the polite but dismissive expressions on every face. These were beings accustomed to proper procedures, established hierarchies, and gradual progress through careful methodology. What he was proposing must seem like dangerous madness. Director, with respect, careful methodology is exactly what hasn't worked for the past 3 years, Marcus replied. The Devourers are 6 cycles away, and conventional research has produced 0 viable solutions. Conventional research, interjected Dr. Thal, the Altarian head of weapons development, has produced 17 new weapon systems, 43 defensive technologies, and over 200 tactical innovations. None of which, Professor Nim said quietly, have proven effective against Devourer capabilities in simulation testing. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Marcus knew that simulation failures were the facility's greatest embarrassment. Despite all their technological advancement, they couldn't even create computer models that successfully resisted Devourer tactics. The simulation systems may be flawed, Dr. Thal insisted. The simulations are based on historical data from the previous invasion, Dr. Zek replied, his compound eyes reflecting the room's lighting. If our new technologies cannot defeat historical Devourer capabilities, what reason do we have to believe they will prove effective against current ones? Director Kesha Tar's crystalline form pulsed with diplomatic colors, attempting to restore order to the meeting. Task Force 7, Perhaps you could explain exactly what alternative approaches you propose to pursue. Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to say would probably convince them he was completely insane. We want to build weapons that don't make sense. The silence that followed was profound. Could you elaborate? Director Keshatar asked carefully. Every weapon system in this facility is based on logical engineering principles: optimal efficiency, maximum output, minimal resource consumption, perfect engineering. Marcus stood up, beginning to pace as his thoughts crystallized. But the Devourers have proven they can analyze and counter any logical system, so we want to build illogical systems. That is... Dr. Thal paused, clearly struggling for diplomatic phrasing. That is not how engineering works. It's not how galactic engineering works, Marcus agreed. But it's exactly how human engineering works. We specialize in solutions that shouldn't function, but do. We excel at combining incompatible technologies in impossible ways that somehow achieve better results than proper engineering. Resonance of ancient wisdom's form brightened with supportive colors. The human proposal has theoretical merit. If Devourer learning systems rely on pattern recognition, then technologies that deliberately violate established patterns might prove unanalyzable. You're suggesting we deliberately design flawed systems? The question came from Dr. Rin Tal, a small amphibious being who headed the Defensive Technology Division. I'm suggesting we design human systems, Marcus replied. Systems that work despite their flaws, not because they're perfect. Professor Nim activated a holographic display, showing complex mathematical models. Statistical analysis of human technological development reveals patterns of innovation that violate conventional optimization principles. Yet human technology frequently outperforms theoretically superior alternatives. Dr. Thal's elegant Altarian features twisted with confusion. How can inferior technology outperform superior alternatives? Because inferior and superior are determined by conventional standards, Captain Rodriguez said, speaking for the first time. Human technology isn't optimized for efficiency or elegance. It's optimized for working under the worst possible conditions. Admiral Harrison leaned forward. Director, we're asking for permission to conduct research using methods that the rest of the galaxy considers primitive and chaotic. In exchange, we'll share any breakthroughs with the facility's research teams. Director Keshatar was quiet for several minutes, his crystalline form cycling through thoughtful color patterns. Finally, he spoke. Task Force 7 will be granted access to Research Laboratory Complex Delta. This section has been sealed for safety reasons due to unstable experimental conditions. It should be suitable for your unconventional research methods. As they left the meeting, Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Laboratory Complex Delta turned out to be everything Director Keshatar had implied. The massive facility had been abandoned after a series of experiments created localized spatial distortions that made the area too dangerous for normal research. Perfect, Dr. Zex said with satisfaction as they toured the damaged laboratories. Existing spatial instabilities will actually enhance our ability to test unconventional technologies. Professor Nim was already setting up his analytical equipment in the complex's central chamber. The mathematical framework here allows for experimental conditions that would be impossible to replicate in stable space. The collective's preserved memories suggest that reality distortions were common during the ancient war, Resonance of Ancient Wisdom added. This environment may be ideal for developing technologies that function under extreme conditions. Marcus looked around the abandoned complex, seeing possibility instead of danger. The facility's main laboratory was a vast circular chamber with equipment mounting points scattered throughout the space. Damaged but functional fabrication systems lined the walls, capable of producing small-scale prototypes of almost any conceivable design. All right, he said, feeling the familiar human excitement of facing an impossible challenge. Let's build something that shouldn't work. The first week was a disaster. Every technology they attempted to combine resulted in immediate failure. Crystalline energy matrices overloaded when integrated with Vrick's biological components. Altarian precision systems crashed when exposed to human programming algorithms. Peboan mathematical optimization routines produced error cascades when applied to deliberately inefficient human designs. Perhaps we should reconsider our approach, Dr. Zeka suggested after their 15th consecutive system failure. His compound eyes were dim with exhaustion, and several of his forearms showed minor burn marks from electrical mishaps. The mathematical analysis suggests that true randomness may be indistinguishable from chaos, Professor Nim added, though he continued working on his calculations with characteristic Peboan persistence. Marcus stood in the center of the laboratory, surrounded by the smoking remains of their latest attempt to weaponize human unpredictability. For a moment, doubt crept into his mind. Maybe the rest of the galaxy was right. Maybe human methods were just primitive and ineffective. Then he remembered something from his years working in waste processing. The most elegant alien systems required constant maintenance and perfect operating conditions. But the makeshift human repairs he implemented kept working despite power fluctuations, temperature variations, and equipment failures that would cripple properly engineered solutions. "We're still thinking like galactic engineers," Marcus announced. "We're trying to build chaotic systems using orderly methods." Resonance of ancient wisdom's crystalline form pulsed with interested colors. "Elaborate. Every failure we've had started with careful planning, detailed schematics, precise calculations. We're trying to engineer chaos, which is impossible." Marcus picked up a piece of debris from their latest explosion. "Real human engineering doesn't start with plans. It starts with problems." Captain Rodriguez looked up from the tactical analysis she had been conducting. "You want to stop planning our experiments?" "I want to start with broken systems and see if we can make them work," Marcus replied. "That's what humans do best." "We take things that are falling apart and jury-rig solutions that somehow keep them functional." Admiral Harrison was studying the laboratory's damaged equipment with new interest. "The spatial distortions in this complex. They're caused by failed experiments, right? Attempts to integrate incompatible technologies?" 17 separate system failures over the past 3 years, Dr. Zeka confirmed. Each one created localized reality distortions that prevented further research in this area. "What if the distortions aren't failures?" Marcus asked. "What if they're actually functioning systems that work in ways their designers didn't expect?" The idea was so fundamentally wrong by galactic engineering standards that it took several minutes for the implications to sink in. "You want to study the failed experiments," Professor Nim said slowly. "Treat the spatial distortions as functional technologies rather than dangerous anomalies." "I want to find out what these failures actually do," Marcus confirmed. "Then I want to see if we can build weapons that fail in useful ways." The work that followed challenged every assumption about technology and engineering that any of them had ever held. Instead of designing systems to work perfectly, they designed systems to fail in specific ways. Instead of eliminating chaos, they incorporated it as a functional component. What they discovered revolutionized their understanding of warfare itself. The first breakthrough came when they realized that spatial distortions weren't random anomalies, but structured changes in local reality. By deliberately triggering specific types of system failures, they could create localized areas where conventional physics operated differently. "The implications are staggering," Dr. Zeka reported during their 3rd week of research. "We can create zones where energy weapons lose coherence, where faster-than-light systems malfunction, where communication networks experience interference patterns." "The mathematical beauty is extraordinary," Professor Nim added, his small form practically glowing with excitement. These failed systems operate according to principles that chaos theory can describe, but traditional engineering cannot predict. Resonance of ancient wisdom had been studying the collective's ancient memories, correlating them with their experimental results. The preserved experiences from the ancient war contain references to weapons that made reality uncertain. We believe your research may have rediscovered technologies that were lost when the previous civilizations fell. But it was Captain Rodriguez who made the connection that changed everything. "These spatial distortions," she said during one of their daily briefings, "they don't just interfere with technology, they interfere with learning itself." Marcus looked up from the prototype he had been adjusting. "What do you mean?" "I've been analyzing devourer behavior patterns from the historical records. They adapt by studying their enemies' technologies, incorporating successful elements into their own systems. But they can only study what follows predictable patterns." Rodriguez activated a holographic display showing their experimental results. "Our failed systems don't follow predictable patterns. They function according to principles that change based on local conditions." Admiral Harrison leaned forward with sudden intensity. "You're saying the Devourers couldn't learn from our technologies because the technologies themselves are constantly changing?" "I'm saying that weapons which fail in chaotic ways might be immune to systematic analysis," Rodriguez replied. "The Devourers can't incorporate something they can't understand, and they can't understand something that violates basic principles of logical operation." Dr. Zekka's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed the implications. "We could create weapons that become more effective the more the enemy tries to analyze them. Weapons that evolve through failure rather than success," Professor Nim added. "Technologies that embody controlled chaos as a functional principle," Resonance of Ancient Wisdom concluded. Marcus felt the pieces of their impossible puzzle finally clicking into place. "We're not just building weapons that don't make sense. We're building weapons that make sense in ways the Devourers can't comprehend." The message from the Emperor arrived during their 4th week of research. It was brief and carried the highest priority encryption. "Devourer advance scouts have reached the Outer Rim. First contact is now projected in 2 cycles. Confederation military forces are requesting immediate deployment of any available anti-Devourer technologies. Report status immediately." Marcus looked around the laboratory at their collection of chaotic prototypes. Systems that worked despite violating every principle of proper engineering. Weapons that failed in useful ways. Technologies that operated according to controlled chaos rather than logical optimization. "Are we ready?" Admiral Harrison asked. Marcus picked up their latest prototype, a device that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts by someone who had never seen a proper schematic. It hummed with barely controlled energy, occasionally sparking in ways that should have indicated imminent failure. Instead, it was the most powerful anti-ship weapon they had ever tested. "No," Marcus said with a grin that would have been familiar to any human who had ever faced impossible odds. "But we're as ready as we're ever going to be. Then let's go save the galaxy with broken technology and impossible weapons," Rodriguez said. As the synthesis departed research facility Omega, loaded with prototypes that shouldn't work but did, Marcus stood in the observation deck watching the stars. Somewhere out there, an ancient enemy was approaching with the power to consume worlds. But they were about to learn something that the rest of the galaxy was finally beginning to understand. Humans didn't just survive impossible situations, they turned impossible situations into advantages. The Devourers had destroyed civilizations that were more advanced, more logical, and more perfect than humanity. They were about to face a civilization that specialized in being chaotic, unpredictable, and beautifully, catastrophically imperfect. And sometimes imperfection was exactly what perfection couldn't overcome.